Well, hello and welcome to this special episode of CIB in Conversation. I'm Don Ward, and it's a fantastic pleasure and privilege to be sat here with the past president of CIB, John McCarthy. John, good morning.
Good morning, Don.
President from 2010 to 2013, but before we get into that, what a fantastic room we find ourselves in.
Yeah, well, it's the Treasury room. It's converted from the state government.
Right, yeah. And we're in the cabinet room, is that right? So this would be the room where the cabinet sat.
Yep.
Who knows, you're where the Chief Minister of Queensland would have sat, is that right?
Absolutely, and this is their table.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, it is a beautiful table. It's a round table for those who can't see on camera. It might be the light isn't perfect, but we've got this stunning bookcase of plates behind us and various interesting paraphernalia around the room. We might do a shot of that at the end of our chat.
Absolutely.
But anyway, John, it's what, 9 years now since you were president. What have you been doing in the meantime?
I still chair Sustainable Built Environment National Research Centre, which of course the Chief Executive is the current president.
He is, and we'll talk about him in a minute.
Right.
Yes.
And I returned in the main to corporate governance. I sit on the board of half a dozen companies, and I've recently been appointed by the Australian Academy of Technology as a mentor for PhD scholars. So it's a great initiative. I thoroughly enjoyed dealing with the kind of people that are seeking a mentor. So it's great.
You've kept yourself impressively busy with a sort of non-executive portfolio, I guess. So, and has that allowed, well, obviously has, in your role with SBE NRC, it's allowed you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world of construction and built environment research.
That's exactly right, Don. I mean, some of the companies that I chair, for example, there's a company called the Village Building Company that's about 35 years old, operates out of Canberra, and its speciality is affordable housing. And that's something very close to my heart. And it's an absolute privilege to chair that kind of organisation. It's lovely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we look back on your period as president of CIB then? So you, 2010 to 2013, and I know we met, well, in fact, we'd already met by that time, but we met during your presidency. How do you reflect back on that time?
Well, the single greatest reflection is how short 3 years is.
Really, yes. Yeah.
And it is amazing that when you are first appointed, the privilege of being appointed, you actually believe that time is on your side. And it's the complete opposite in reality. It's essential to hit the ground running. And I look back and I don't think I did. I think the first 12 months was almost getting an understanding of what it was I wanted to achieve. And I don't think it's a particularly harsh judgment on myself that I should have had an agenda firmly in my mind that would roll out over 36 months. If I did, the first 12 months were lost.
Oh, well, I'm sure that's very harsh on yourself.
Well, that's what I believe. And there was a lot of restructuring going on, and that I was pleased about. And it was once described to me that the CIB was really a gentleman's club. Well, we quashed that fairly early on, and I rejected that concept. I think it's much more a powerhouse of research. And one of the most wonderful things when you're immersed in CIB, and this is absolutely true, it is devoid of politics. I've never, in all my dealings within CIB, and I think my involvement was a total of either 12 years or 15 years. I can't...
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Because that's the 3-year presidency, then you're an immediate past president anyway, so you've got another 3 years to defend all the mistakes you made.
And you were on the board before you became president.
Oh yeah. I did. Yeah. I think I did 6 years before I was president. So in a way, I don't think I'm being particularly harsh, but I think it would be false modesty to say, other than I rejected almost all of the structure that had been in place for a number of years.
Right.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
And yeah, you're nothing if not an excellent diplomat, John. So full marks to you for that.
So,
I mean, what strikes me, funnily enough, is it's you've given a little bit of advice there, I think, to a future incoming president in terms of hitting the ground running and so on, and having a plan. So is that what, if you were to reflect back, and if you could do anything differently, that would be it, would it?
Oh yeah. I would have mapped out for myself exactly what I wanted to achieve and I keep saying 36 months because when you say 3 years, it sounds quite a long time.
Yes.
But if you say 36 months, after the first month in the role, you've only got 35 months.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I thought I could do was get inside and have the authority, of course, with the board, to make changes. And those changes took far longer than I'd allowed before the agenda that we wanted to create as the board.
Yes.
And as I say, the other thing, of course, is, and what would I say to an incoming president? I wouldn't say anything, but enjoy.
Yes.
It is an absolute joy, the role, and the support and enthusiasm that I tried to create was paid back in enormous returns from everyone that I dealt with. It was amazing.
Keith Hansen might not be on camera, John, but he's making his presence known. So it's fine, we'll cut it out.
I wondered if there was a wild animal in the room.
Sounded like it.
Yeah, it did.
It did. I'm going to take the opportunity to wipe my nose. No, I think we'll leave that in, Keith, actually.
Something akin to an elephant. All right.
So I mean, how do you look back in terms of strategic highlights? So you had some housekeeping to do. You had to put some processes in order, if you like. In terms of achievements from the 3 years, how would you sum that up?
I think the responsibility to ensure that the handover to the incoming president was a lot different from the way it was handed to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I can put it that way.
Yeah, again, you're being diplomatic.
And I do believe that since that took place, that succession has worked so much better to the benefit of the CIB. And there's, as I observe it, as almost an outsider now, that has been a wonderful legacy that I've observed. So the camaraderie and the opportunity to create that camaraderie is a privilege. I remember when I was first looking at membership and trying to get my head around that for 8,000 euros at the time, I'd have access to 3,000 plus researchers. Now, we in Australia have a population of about 25 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And therefore our resources for research are somewhat limited, although I think we do punch above our weight. But to have that access to little or no money, really, and to enjoy the return of intellectual property is something that I never got over. I tell everyone about it. They still, lots of corporations in Australia are sceptical, but then they're sceptical of research.
Right.
And that's another challenge, always.
It is, isn't it? And I mean, you're chair of the SBE NRC, and you have a great model there in terms of collaborative co-creation of research. I mean, what other sort of advice do you have really for CIB to improve that perception of the value of research?
There's no question, real outcomes. If you can demonstrate to an organisation the benefits of a research program in affordable housing, and they see a benefit within their own portfolio, they'll embrace it. If you describe to them a research process and how you go about it, you'll almost certainly get shut down and rejection. They don't want to know. Mm-hmm. They only want to know of the outcome, not the process. So we at SBE NRC go out of our way to highlight outcomes. The other thing we do is we make short-term forays into research. All our research is based on an initial 18-month outcome. Therefore, each 6 months, we are saying to our members, this is where we're up to, and here is a 6-month outcome, here is a 12-month outcome, and here is an 18-month final outcome, which may be revisited at a point in time, but that's a hard outcome, all hard outcome. For CIB, the natural pushback by commerce and corporate bodies is to say, well, it's just a research organisation. And you've got to take that off the table. You're not ever just a research organisation. You are about delivering very, very hard outcomes to world problems.
Yes.
And that again, I think anyone that's involved in CIB should think of it as a privilege, not a task.
Well, that's absolutely. That's a great description of the value of CIB. Just bear with me a second, John, because I need to just pause the recording whilst I get my notes back. The screen managed to switch off. We're doing fine, and we've got about 5 minutes to go.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask about Keith. I'm going to ask about your view of how research innovation has moved on, and then we'll finish. So we're down. We're down here. I'll come back in at that point, and then we'll finish with this.
Is it flowing?
Here. It's flowing absolutely great. Well,
very good.
Keith's the one to comment, but yeah.
From the wild animal in the corner, it's flowing like a herd of
It's absolutely fine, yes. I mean, just before we leave the subject of SBE NRC, John, you were the first Australian president of CIB.
Yep.
And then 9 years later, along comes the second one. And not only is he the second Australian, but of course he's from SBE NRC as well. Yep. So how do you feel about Keith Hansen?
I'm not sure that I really know Keith. We've only been together 21 years. I was so delighted when he was fortunate enough to be approached and appointed. Keith brings a unique energy. I always say that no one should stand between Keith and a network opportunity. And it's all based on network. And he's taught me the value of network. I mean, our newsletter now for our SBE is 11,000 worldwide. And it's a genuine 11,000 because we monitor the hits.
Yes.
These aren't waste paper bin statistics. These are real. So I'm thrilled for him. He's given it his absolute best shot. Not least of all appointing you, which I thought was no, it's not a mutual admiration society. I think it was a great appointment, and CIB was so lucky to get you. Not saying it because you're sitting there, it's a fact, and you've worked so well together. I mean, it's been so look, I just hope he has enjoyed the 3 years. I must say, being immediate past president is a joy as well, because you kind of get lots of kudos without actual nose to the grindstone. But look, it's such a wonderful agenda. You know, the world is full of problems. So many of them man-made. If we don't address them, they'll only get worse. They won't mend. It's you know, I won't. It's almost a cliche now. Climate change, and thanks to the 14-year-old Swedish schoolgirl, but it's real, and we've tried to ignore things like food security, affordable housing. Possibly one of my biggest regrets was the affordable housing project for the subcontinent. And we ended up with a $20 million US grant from the United Nations to produce these boxes, but those boxes contained running water and sanitation, and we could produce dwellings for $4,000 US a dwelling. And I was on the cusp of launching that when, for absolute internal Indian politics, I shouldn't really say this, but I will, it didn't proceed. That's probably my biggest regret in my role as CIB, that single one.
Yes.
And as I say, I went there, I gave it my best shot. So the agenda for CIB is probably more robust, as I look at it, than it's ever been. It's no longer focused purely on construction and building, and that's to its benefit as well, because it almost becomes myopic if you just try and not embrace all the other problems that are impacting on construction. And innovation, of course, is the key. It's, you know, the cliched Einstein quote, you know, research is all about not knowing where you're going, because if you know where you're going, it's not research. It's true.
Yes.
So much of what he said was true. And it's for the next president and the president after that and the president after that, I just hope the organisation keeps its improving pathway and its dominance of research in the sector.
Well, I share that sentiment, John. I certainly think that CIB has this important role in facilitating a global network and improving the reputation, if you like, or the profile of good research in terms of impact, in terms of making a difference. And I think a lot of those values, you know, you were in the lead in instilling those in the organisation and through the board and so on and so forth. So I thank you for those. Perhaps just one final thought, if I may, John. We're sitting here in Brisbane in late March, so we're 3 months away from the World Building Congress, which we'll be back in Australia for, but down in Melbourne. What are your memories of the World Building Congress?
Again, I don't want to keep using the same words, but an amazing camaraderie. And and we should all know this from the COVID experience. Technology meetings with the aid of technology are nothing like face-to-face.
Yes.
And for anyone that's in any way thinking of coming to Melbourne in July, please do so, because I know you get more out of it than you'll ever put in. That's probably true of CIB all up.
Yeah.
But the presentation of the papers, the diversity of the topics, the ability for everyone to bounce ideas off one another, it's just a fantastic experience. I remember it glowingly. Probably ate too much. But it's so worthwhile, and again, I remember this deeply, devoid of politics. Everyone was there to make it as successful as possible, insofar as gauging success by practical outcomes when you attend and think about the papers that are being presented. It's just wonderful.
And I'm glad you drew attention to the COVID situation, because I think, possibly we were taking it for granted 2 years ago that and perhaps we were even a little bit conference tired, I don't know.
Yep.
And but having had 2 years without that face-to-face contact, so many people have said to me about this point of feeling re-energised once they're able to get back together again face-to-face.
Well, I think last night, for those of you that weren't here, we had a board dinner, and unbelievably, that's the first one we've had for 2.25 years.
Right. Yes.
And
that's an Australian board. That's the SBE
that's an Australian board.
So it just shows you.
So we haven't met, and this is something close to my heart, since the day before St Patrick's Day. With a name like McCarthy, it looms large.
I hadn't picked that up, but yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So 2.25 years. So yes, we survived. We survived with MS Teams and Zoom, and without it, heaven knows what the end result could have been. But it's wonderful to be back in person, and I hope whatever years I've got left, I never have to enter a lockdown again.
Yes.
Miserable.
Yeah. Well, let's not finish on a note of, of being miserable.
Certainly not.
So I look forward to seeing you in Melbourne in late June, and for the people watching, John will be there, and so do catch up with him over a glass of good red wine.
Absolutely.
Or two. Or I was going to say, or white.
Or Chardonnay.
And John, it's been a fantastic privilege to catch up, and thank you very much for your time today. And see you in Melbourne.
Indeed.
Thank
Don,
you.
it's certainly been my pleasure and my privilege, to see you again and to reflect on my time at CIB. So thank you.
Thank you for that reflection.